Hello, this is Mr. Smith, also known as Teach Smith on YouTube, and this is a Power and Conflict poetry lesson, the second half, Exposure Part 2, for the week commencing the 29th of June 2020. This video is primarily for Year 9 students at Reigate School, though of course other students are welcome to have a watch and a listen. Of course, if you haven't watched the first video on Exposure Part 1, please do so now. So remember, we've looked at the whole of the charge of the Light Brigade. We're going to finish exposure today, and we're going to then go on to study remains. The main messages of the poem: Owen portrays the weather as the true enemy, the true killer of soldiers in the trenches, and Owen exposes the futility, the pointlessness of World War I. Remember, these are the conditions they have to deal with. So, this stanza, I believe, is about the effects of hypothermia. Why do I say this? Well, the stanza opens with the personification and alliteration of the snow. The snow is not randomly falling, the snow is seeking the soldiers out, it's seeking their faces out in order to freeze their faces, feeling for our faces. It emphasizes the calculated effects, or it feels like the snow is calculated, like it's an enemy to be feared, ultimately a murderous enemy, as the cold is killing them. So the soldiers try to retreat into trenches, dugouts, foxholes, but it doesn't work. Why? Because it hasn't got suddenly warmer, magically. Something is happening between this transition between snow-dazed and sun-dozed. What I think is happening is one of two things. Either the soldiers are trying to dream of, or trying to think of, or trying to imagine a better place. They're trying to consciously take themselves out of this reality, or they're suffering from the early stages of hypothermia. Often one of the symptoms of hypothermia is hallucinating, and often a soldier will start to feel warm, or a person will start to feel warm when they're hypothermic, even when they're freezing cold. That's why it goes from snow-dazed to sun-dozed, and suddenly feels like it's spring, blossoms and blackbirds and grass, all these sort of images of spring, when in fact they're still in the frozen trenches. So it's that hallucinating feeling, or that hallucinating effect of the hypothermia. And then this very brutal and very stark rhetorical question at the end: are they numb? Are they hallucinating? Or are they actually dying? Why such a pointless death? It's not accomplishing anything. It feels pointless, a slow, grinding death. Remember, at any point you can pause this video and make sure that you have your notes completed. Now, this metaphor of the ghosts is very important. It could either be actual ghosts, that they have died and their spirits are going back to haunt or to go back home. They could be ghosts because they have unfinished business. People who believe in ghosts often say it's because people are ghosts because they have unfinished business of some kind. Or they're ghosts because when sent on leave, they're so exhausted, they're so worn out, they feel like they're dead. And also, soldiers coming back from the war, coming back from the trenches, wouldn't know how to explain things to their families. They would feel like outsiders, they would feel alien, they would feel traumatized. They wouldn't know how to describe what they'd been through. And they look very different to their families, and their families perhaps wouldn't even know how to communicate with them, which would lead to this further sense of alienation. So one way or another, they do feel like ghosts. Now, this word glozed is very interesting. Owen has created this word glozed from glazed and glowed, with crusted dark red jewels. It's the metaphor of the burning coals, their appearance, and also how precious they are. So I'll just show you what I mean. So the coals look very beautiful. You know, if you've ever been sitting by a natural fireplace, you know, it's a very lovely thing to look at, very calming and very pretty. Coals can look like actual jewels in a way, but it's about how precious it is to them. Remember, these soldiers have been in freezing conditions, and the fire is the most precious thing to them in all of the world at that moment. Nothing else is more important to them than the heat and the warmth of this fire. Then you have this very stark, blunt statement which kind of supports the fact that they're not actually ghosts actual literal ghosts. They've been on leave instead, and they go back to die. If they survive this leave, the next time they're probably going to die again. It's so brutal, it's so stark, it's so unforgiving in its honesty. Interesting use of we, actually. Perhaps there's a unity there, but a very sort of sad unity. They're unified in the fact that they know they will die. It's a very poignant moment there. This is probably the trickiest stanza to understand in the poem. Let me just show you something which I think will help you. So some of you in Year 8 might remember studying war poems and war propaganda in Year 8, and this is one of the posters that you might have looked at in Year 8, and it kind of sums up what Owen is arguing against in this stanza. So you had the soldier pointing to a very idyllic, very idealized, very pretty version of England, with the rolling hills, the green beautiful hills, the little cottages, the front gardens with the flowers. And he is asking you, isn't this worth fighting for? Isn't it worth defending? Isn't the cottages and fields and plants and beautiful blue sky worth defending? So this is what Owen is arguing against. The whole stanza is dedicated to arguing against the propaganda of the time. Young men were recruited in the belief that they must defend the country or it would be destroyed. It's not saying that defending your country is never a good idea, but that World War I did not achieve that in the right way. World War I was often pointless. World War I's battles and death were often pointless. So you had this personification of England, the Kine fires, which again links back to the sunk fires, the glozed jewels in the previous stanza, and the personification and sibilance of sun's smile. So England as a mother or father, almost idealized, nourishing, fragile, and worth defending to the last man. God's invincible spring, our love is made afraid. Spring will always be there, nature will always be there, but they've been told that if they don't defend it, somehow that will be lost. And it's not possible. Again, ending a stanza on a very stark point. For love of God seems dying. Faith, religious belief, patriotic duty, it's dying out in them. Or you could read it another way. You could say, if I love God, that means I need to die, perhaps. Interesting reading that, I think. It's just occurred to me. Tonight this frost will fasten on this mud and us. That alliteration saying that the frost will indefinitely, without a doubt, fasten to them, freeze them. It's powerful, it's deeply painful. There's no escape, there's no choice, there's no chance, and it was going to hurt. This is emphasized by, this is reinforced by these verbs, these gerunds: shriveling, puckering, shaking. The effects of this frost, the effects of this cold. Shriveling, puckering, shaking. Debilitating, painful effect of the cold. Now, this is one of my favourite metaphors. All their eyes are ice. Apologies, one moment. Yeah, so this is one of my favourite metaphors. All their eyes are ice. The men that are dead, their eyes are frozen open, lifeless, no emotion, staring back at the people burying the bodies. And the soldiers are burying them. They have frost in their own eyes. Their eyes are stinging from the frost. Their eyes are emotionless as well because they're numb to everything that's happening. And their eyes are emotionless because they don't even know the people they're burying. It's not a funeral. It's a necessity. If the bodies stay out in the open, it's going to cause illness amongst the other men. And it's a really awful way to end your life. Anonymous, frozen, and forgotten perhaps. And even with all this sacrifice, even with all these awful things that have happened, both in this stanza and throughout the poem, nothing happens. All this suffering is for nothing. So just as a plenary Year 9, just think about what you think is the most effective line in the poem. I'm fairly certain I've given away what my line is, what you think my line is. but you have your own choice. Don't just think about this week, think about the first week as well of exposure. What is the most effective line in the poem and why? Again, you can just think about that, or you can write a comment or show my homework as well. So thank you very much, Year 9. I hope this video has been educational and informative. There'll be other tasks throughout the week to help support your learning. Thank you.